Yo, what's good, everybody? Good morning. Yo, so today I want to talk about study designs. So this is going to include case series, case control studies, cohort studies, cross-sectional studies, and randomized clinical trials as well. This is like, one of these five study designs is like guaranteed to come up on your exams. So you got to just know it. I know you might think that you know it, but I know for a fact that you sometimes get these questions wrong. So tune in. All right. We're going to just do this, try to get this under 15 minutes. All right. So, um, so, you know, all of these study designs can be answered by asking these three questions. Is there a comparison group? Do we start with the exposure or outcome? And is there an intervention? So, and if you answer these things, like the study design is gonna be so obvious. So, what do we mean by observational studies versus experimental studies? So, observational studies are just simply what we observe and what just happens in like naturally. Whereas experimental studies, there is involvement from the researcher actively assigning an intervention, and so and lucky for us, the only experimental study design from the five I mentioned is the randomized clinical trial. So let's start with the case series. I feel like the case series is definitely the most simple study design, and just involves describing a group of patients who all have the same disease or condition. There's no comparison group, no control group, and no statistics such as like odds ratios or relative risk. So it's just like usually describing. I think the best way to put it is like it's like describing um, a small number of patients with the same diagnosis. Like literally, that's literally it. So like if you see that like the question is just this only describing something, then it's case series. As for case controls, it always starts with the outcome, and you've already identified the people who have the disease already, and then you compare them to people who do not have the disease, and then you look back to assess prior exposure. And we do have a statistic to measure case control, which is odds ratio. And so some of the clues to separate patients based on disease status and asking about past exposure. So case control studies are useful for rare diseases, but sometimes like the bias that they usually have is like recall and selection. But I feel like case control, yeah, just like look to see if they have the disease already, and then you've already eliminated like a lot of the other ones. But like start with the disease. Okay, that's just like the most important. Um, and the cohort studies, they start with the exposure, and then the patient, and then they follow the patients forward in time to see who develops the disease. So um, and they use relative risk as their statistics. And so yeah, so you just gotta read the question, obviously, and you kind of have to see does this patient already have the disease or not. um and if they do not, like, you gotta look for the exposure, like look for something that's like that could possibly cause the sickness. And and I have some sample questions at the end of the video that'll help really explain cross-sectional study. So cross-sectional study, it measures exposure and outcome at the same time. And yeah, just think of it as like a snapshot in time, and everything is measured at the same time. So you can't determine like which came first, like the other studies that we mentioned, right? And so And the important thing is that cross sectionals are great for measuring prevalence, and but they cannot establish causality. And the last study that we have is the randomized clinical trial, in which it is the only experimental study in which participants are randomly assigned to receive an intervention or a control, such as a placebo. And this is the gold standard study design because randomization minimizes confounding. Um, and so, yeah, so if they give you a question and it has like random assignment, it has treatment, it has placebo groups, and it has blinding, right? I feel like that's like a really good clue for RCTs. So, what's the strategy? Yeah, just remember the three questions that we discussed earlier in the PowerPoint. Which is there a comparison group? Do we start with exposure or outcome, and is there intervention? So I feel like that's like pretty much the strategy. But yeah, here is a sample question. Just read it. I'll say the answer in 5 seconds. Five, four, three, two, one. Okay. So the answer to this question is case control study. Um, which of the following best describes the study design used in this investigation? A researcher is studying whether a history of coffee consumption is associated with the development of pancreatic cancer. Individuals diagnosed with pancreatic cancer are identified from hospital records, and a comparison group without pancreatic cancer is selected from the same population. Past coffee intake is then assessed in both groups. Okay, so this one, um, let's see. So we have to we have to first see that the cases are individuals with pancreatic cancer, and the controls are individuals without pancreatic cancer, right? And so you know that like some of these individuals are diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, right? And so and there is a comparison group, so you can automatically eliminate case series and RCT as well, because there's like no like blinding or anything like that. um and then you can eliminate cohort study because it's not like um something it's not like uh it didn't start out with nobody having anything, and then coffee like caused it, if that makes sense. um yeah, like you already have patients who have the disease, and then you're comparing it to a group that doesn't have the disease, right? So it's like the same thing that we mentioned earlier with case control. We said that you're comparing someone who's diseased versus non-disease, and that's exactly what is going on here. And then we're going back in time to assess the prior exposure, which is past coffee intake. So that's kind of why it's case control, and it's not a cohort study because the groups um, the groups are not like in the cohort study. The groups are subjected by exposure first, and then it follows them forward to outcomes. But it's not like that, right? So that's question 2. Okay, do the same. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so which of the following best describes the study design? An investigator evaluates the effectiveness of St. John's wort for the treatment of mild depression. 100 participants are randomly assigned to receive either St. John's wort or a placebo. Okay. Depressive symptoms are measured using a standardized rating scale at baseline and again 4 weeks later. Okay, so I think this one is a lot easier. So we have a lot of participants. They're randomly assigned, a huge clue, and there's also a placebo. So um, yeah, so that's kind of why everything, and the outcome is also measured after treatment. So right, so after 4 weeks. So that's why it's controlled trial. Nothing else really makes sense. Um, and it's not a crossover because in a crossover trial, participants will receive both treatments sequentially. So they're like the control as well. Switching groups, and they receive like one intervention. I mean, and in this scenario, there's only the participants only receive one intervention, so that's why it's not a crossover. Oh, sorry. But okay, and then the last question. Okay, I'll give you 5 seconds again. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So, which of the following best describes the study design? Which patients with the prior history of DVT are enrolled in a longitudinal study examining the development of chronic venous insufficiency? At study entry, participants are assessed for baseline disease status. At a follow-up visit 2 years later, participants report whether they consistently wore compression stockings during the study period. The prevalence of chronic venous insufficiency is then compared between those who wore compression stockings and those who did not. Okay, so all right, so this is a cohort study because they are grouped based on exposure. So whether or not they wore the compression stockings or they didn't, and they're followed over time. So follow up visit 2 years. So they're followed over time to assess how their chronic venous insufficiency is doing, right? So, and you just gotta note that, yeah. So the exposure is not assigned by the investigator. The participants are free of outcome at baseline, and that outcome is assessed after a period of follow up. So you might look at the word prevalence and be like, wait, isn't that cross sectional? But I mean, it's not even an answer choice, right? So hope that helped. I'm sorry that it was so like messy. I feel like I could have definitely done a better job, but yeah, here's just like big comparison table. Yeah, it's like I've been like trying to make these videos better, obviously, but I've been like so busy with other things like school and stuff, and like also I'm working on some projects as well, so like yeah, I'm just like super limited on time, but I just hope that um it helps somebody out. um yeah, I think I'm going to make an additional videos on doing like the math for these, especially like for like case control and cohort, because the odds ratio and relative ratio, they come up so often, and I feel like yeah, you can get at least like 2 or 3 questions correct just because of these, right? But yeah, just remember, case control. I think these two are like the most annoying ones. Definitely, case control and cohort are the most annoying ones. Like, I feel like question one, dude, like this question, bro. I feel like this is like trying to trick you into think that this is cohort because like it's like, oh, like it's giving you some type of like um it's trying to give you like some type of exposure, right? But it's just important to know like that some people already have the pancreatic cancer versus, and they're comparing to some people who don't. So right, disease versus non-disease, and then yeah, and then they go back in time to see if coffee intake was like uh an exposure or something. Yeah, and then whereas like the cohort is just like, they're given the compression stockings, right? Like that's the exposure that they received, and they're followed over time. So yeah, so I guess like yeah. So question like cohort or case control, like boom, like you already have the outcome. Fact, like you already have the outcome, and then you're looking back. Whereas you're given for a cohort, you're like given the exposure, and then like given the exposure, you're given the compression stockings and then followed up over time. So yeah, but yeah, I hope this helps. I'm so sorry that it's just like so messy today. I'm like running on like possibly 2 hours of sleep, but all good. Hey, drop a comment if you're confused, bro. I love to help. For real. Um, yeah. Enjoy the rest of your day. Study hard, obviously. I hope everyone like my mental is always just like, yo, I'm gonna give everything that I do 100%. Um, which includes every question. So this is kind of my mental, and I kind of hope everyone kind of adapts that mental too. Like no matter what you're doing, no matter how like unconfident you feel, no matter how much like you're fearing XYZ like future and stuff. I think if you just go in with the mindset of being like, okay, hey, bro, no matter what I do, no matter what actions I take, no matter like what sports I play, I'm gonna just give my 100%. And I feel like if you just do that, you're not always gonna succeed for sure. But like if you just do that, I think you're gonna just like be more proud of yourself at the end of the day because like you really gave it your all, right? And so like if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But at least you can tell yourself that like, hey, I gave my all. All right. But I'm gonna leave you with that. Have a good one, bro. Peace.